achieved.
So the next big thing in MMA might actually be out of MMA, at least. It would appear that Cain Velasquez's career in the UFC and in mixed martial arts has come to an end, as he has left the USADA testing pool and opted to sign a lucrative contract with the UFC or with the WWE, and setting up what is essentially a rematch from his UFC 121, I believe it was, event. World heavyweight title fight against Brock Lesnar, this time with the WWE title on the line. I think it's fantastic for Cain. It's a great career move. He came back. He had a pretty rough showing against Francis Ngannou. He's put his body through hell, and now he gets an opportunity to cash in on it. Now, how do I think Cain's going to do? He's very athletic. In his fight, wrestling matches, I believe in Mexico, he did very well. He looked very good. Will that translate well to the WWE crowd? The first thing I saw when I watched the clip of him coming out, taking on Cain, is he did not look like the prototypical WWE wrestler. You know, the guy with busting pecs and a giant back and a six-pack and all those things. You know, I think Cain would be smart to go the way of, like, with The Undertaker, some of these other fighters who, plainly simple, put a shirt on. Wore an outfit that kind of took away from his physical appearance, because that's not what he's going to get by on. He needs to get by on just that mean, nasty look, that push him as a cardio monster who just runs guys over and just keeps going. Someone who's like that force that you just can't slow down, and then it's the, you know, indestructible force versus the immovable object when him and Brock Lesnar come together. I think that would be the best way to promote him. We'll have to wait and see. Brendan Schaub's kind of come out and said that he thinks it won't be long before Cain will be on the juice and he'll be gassed up and looking like a monster. And there's been inklings that Vince McMahon not overly happy with the way Cain looks as a competitor. We'll see how it plays out. I definitely will tune. I'm not a huge wrestling fan anymore like I used to be. I'll definitely catch it as much as, you know, if I get an opportunity to see something he's done. I paid a little attention when Ronda Rousey was over there to see how she fared. Either way, it'll be very interesting going forward. Welcome back to Kamikaze Overdrive MMA Predictions. Always, I am your host, Scott Johnson. And on this episode of the show, we are breaking in the upcoming UFC on ESPN 6 event, which will go down on October 18th, which is a Friday night. Keep that in mind, folks. Friday night, not Saturday, Friday. We're in the TD Garden, the home of my Boston Bruins, Brad Marchand, Patrice Bergeron, and David Pasternak and co. Zdeno Chara as well. So very excited to check this event out. We've got a pretty fun main event with Dominick Reyes taking on the former middleweight champion Chris Weidman in the UFC's light heavyweight division. 6 main card fights in total. I'll be giving you my predictions for all of those. There are 7 preliminary fights that I'll be breaking down for you at kamikazeoverdrive.net, so please check them out. Again, make sure you pay attention, folks. My prelim picks are in writing for free at kamikazeoverdrive.net. I have people ask me, why do I have to pay for your picks? You don't. Where are they? You know, why aren't they listed here? They're not, because they're on my website. People wanting timestamps, all those fun things. They're over at my site. I post them throughout the week as I get them done. I will do my best to get these things up and running quickly. Now, as far as my bet packs are concerned, we're coming off a bit of an anomaly. I went 11-3 at UFC Fight Night 161. Now, my HBC, my hardcore betting pack, returned 38.22 units. That's 4 big wins in the last 5 nights. That's huge. Unfortunately, my CBC, which is the casual bet pack, lost 15 units. Now, considering we have won, not quite, just over 150 units over the last 5 shows, we can afford to have a loss like that. Now, here's the way it breaks down. Well, my gold plays look fantastic, and I had Ulrich, Vera, Figueiredo, and Price as my top fave picks, Fribolo, Ribas, and Swanson as my top dog picks all coming through. I had 3 crucial fights that didn't cash, and a couple of them were really unfortunate. Gerald Meerschaert losing a split decision is my top gold play. If he cashes, we roll with a massive return in both bet packs. Unfortunately, I felt he won rounds 2 and 3, but he got away from his base, which kind of hurt him in winning that fight. I also felt, and you look at, his name is escaping me at this point in time, but he fought Alex Morano. Why am I drawing a blank here? And everybody's yelling at the thing right now. Max Griffin. I was very upset with Max Griffin because I felt he came out a little too passive in the opening round, didn't utilize his wrestling to take Morano's edge off, but then he was winning the second round, got the knockdown, hurt him. And then instead of going for strikes, he tried to take him down, which ultimately cost him. He got knocked down at the end of the round, cost him the round, then dominated the third round. If one of those 2 fighters come through and win, we cash huge. If both come through, we're in a huge position to pay out. And again, I'm having a lot of success recently. You look at my last handful of shows, my one obviously was the down at UFC Fight Night 160, which is down, but 9-2, 7-3, 3-10, 7-4, 11-3. And again, predicting fights in this modern day is not easy. There are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 fights on this card that I would consider high-end favorites, or those where your favorite is less than minus 165. It really can go either way. And I find more and more we're seeing more and more of these fights where it used to be 3 or 4 of these matchups on a card of 12 fights. Now we're getting 5, 6, 7, and up into double digits, which means the matchmaking is getting better. It's getting more difficult. So for me and all those other match predictors out there, make sure you give them all the credit they deserve, simply because, don't give me any credit, give them credit. It's difficult to do this job and to do it consistently. Also, before you buy my bet packs, which are only $15, you can follow me on Twitter at KO_predictions. Make sure you subscribe to me on YouTube and like my video. And on that note, I've been rambling for a little bit. Let's get to that first main card prediction. The opening fight of the night transpires in the UFC's middleweight division as the undefeated 6-0 Deron Winn takes on Darren, the Dentist Stewart, with a current record of 9 wins, 4 losses, and 1 no contest. Now, Stewart has won 3 of 4. Including 2 finishes of Bird and Spicely, a decision win over Bevon Lewis, and he lost a split decision over to Edmund Shabazian in his one defeat during this current stretch. For Stewart, he had a debut versus Eric Spicely, scoring a decision victory. He also beat Tom Lawler in the one-and-done Golden Boy promotion event, and he won his Bellator debut as well prior to that, so he's had some decent experience for a guy who's only fought a little bit. Physically, Stewart stands 6 inches taller than Winn, and it's not because Stewart's a towering mass. Winn is like 5'6", some will give him 5'7", he's incredibly short for the division. We will also see a 4-inch reach advantage for Stewart, who is a younger man by a year. Now, again, I said Winn is very short for the division. That is very interesting to see how that plays out, and I'm not sure if that is a good thing or a bad thing, which we'll talk about a bit, but it just doesn't look your traditional middleweight. But again, at the same time, when you look at Daniel Cormier, who a guy he trains with, you could make the same assumptions there. Now, Winn comes from a very strong wrestling background. He trains with DC, but we didn't see a lot of it in his first fight, in the sense that, at least offensively. Defensively, he did a nice job of shutting down Eric Spicely's attempts to get the fight to the max. He is a jiu-jitsu black belt, but he opted to keep the fight standing. Now, he throws with big power. He's got these big hooks. He's got a powerful right hand. He moves in with hammers and just smashes his opponent, and he works the body. He was rocking Spicely to the body very early on, and he does very good work when he gets his opponent backed up, and he's very effective there. His low stature allows him to come over the top with those heavy, high power strikes. But at the same time, when his opponent goes up with a high guard, he can rip the body because he's right in that position to just hammer away, and he was doing that very effectively against Spicely. But it also creates the scenario for a lot of big swings and misses. When he's throwing that power and not measuring distance well and having trouble finding his range, he throws big power that doesn't connect, and that drains your cardio, especially when you're doing it so frequently. We saw in that last fight, he started to slow down after a very fast start. Is his style economical? Well, until he got the step up in competition, he was a first-round finisher all the way through. Now, he still had success, but as the competition improves, will that continue? He was backing up in round 3 at times. Spicely, who's not known for his striking ability, didn't have him hurt, but at least had him backing up and on the defensive for times. And again, that's the situation against a non-power puncher. How does that change against a guy like Darren Stewart, who can throw significant heat and get you out of there? Now, there were times where Winn went with a better game plan, where he was throwing more volume with less power. He was doubling up his jab from the left side very effectively, but ultimately he couldn't resist loading up for those power shots and trying to get Spicely out of there, and that's something he needs to be very mindful of. You simply cannot do at this level on a consistent basis. Now, it's worth noting he did take that fight on short notice, and it was his debut. This should put him in a better spot this time around. Now, for Darren Stewart, he's known for his striking power. He finished the aforementioned Spicely and Bird in round 2. He carries power late in the fights, which he's done a couple of times in his career, stopping guys in later rounds. Against Lewis, he came out with some early leg kicks and took his base away and just smashed him there and kind of caught him off guard early on. Lots of clinch fighting back and forth. I don't know if that's something he wants to do against the lower stature, far superior wrestler and Winn, but he had success against Lewis in that spot. Now, Stewart did get out grappled by Edmund Shabazian. He gave up 8 takedowns. He spent a lot of time on the cage, on his back, and it wasn't until Shabazian slowed down we saw Stewart have some success, but Stewart just showed no urgency, and that's something he's known for doing, sitting back and just letting the fight kind of play out and not really doing anything to change the complexion of the matchup, and then boom, suddenly he's behind on the cards and can't get the finish. Now, when Lewis went for takedowns, Stewart did an excellent job of breaking his hands and creating separation and getting away, and was able to stay vertical for the most part. When they broke, he was unloading in bursts and moving forward, almost running forward, throwing bombs, which again, not exactly economical, but it works. His volume was far less against Lewis than we've seen in previous fights, and again, he's the type of guy who's got some cardio issues. He cannot afford to push a fast pace. He's that type of fighter where getting an early near stoppage could actually cost him the fight, because he goes for it, doesn't get it, and then rounds 2 and 3, he's just out of gas and struggling. He needs to be patient in his matchups and just make sure he does things in a method that's not going to diminish his cardio. Ultimately, this matchup comes down to Winn outworking Stewart with striking volume and potentially some takedowns and clinch control, or Stewart catching him coming in with a power strike, or waiting him out, Winn gassing, and Stewart getting the finish that way. Those are the two essential win scenarios for these two guys. I think the latter scenario where Stewart wins is far less likely. It's certainly not impossible, but the percentage of chances of it happening are less. I think Winn finds some success with takedowns in this matchup. We'll see him switch things up. I think he'll just be the busier fighter, throwing some power strikes, moving forward. We'll see a lot of grinding on the cage where Spicy just has trouble getting into those positions. We might see some tense moments, especially later on, if Winn can't get the finish, where he's maybe struggling to maintain his composure as Stewart tries a late rally. I think, as I said, he's in a better spot here, having a full camp and this being his second UFC fight. And I think we have a good, entertaining matchup. But my prediction is Deron Winn to defeat Darren Stewart by decision. Fight number 2 in the main card stands to be a very fun and interesting matchup. We're in the UFC's women's flyweight division as the undefeated Maycee, the future Barber, with she's ranked 12th in the division. Her current record stands at 7-0. She is taking on the 7-3 savage Gillian Robertson, currently ranked 15th. And she's fighting out of Canada, my home country. Now, Barber's undefeated, and she's been a fighter who's kind of been tabbed with a bright future. They look at her and say, very similar to Cynthia Calvillo, a lot of early promise, and certainly someone who's young and got a lot of talent, and the UFC kind of was getting behind her. So far, she's 2-0 in the UFC with TKO wins in both her fights over Cyphers and JJ Aldrich, who we just saw put on a very good performance. And you look at those two fighters, excluding the two Maycee Barber losses, those two girls are combined 6-1 in the UFC, so they've had a good run, and so that shows you how the quality of fights Barber's put together. Now for Gillian Robertson, 4-1 inside the promotion, all 4 wins by finishes, which is very impressive. 2 TKO, 2 submission. Her only loss by submission in a fight she ultimately won the round and then got submitted right at the end. Both girls are 5'5", 2-inch reach advantage for Maycee, and she is the younger fighter by 3 years. Now Barber's coming off a win that was far from easy. In fact, she got sat down a couple of times in the first round. She was outclassed by Aldrich and was in trouble, and it looked like she was about to have some of that shine come off her hype train, but Aldrich couldn't continue to put it together, and Barber got her out of there in round 2 very impressively. Hats off for that effort to both girls, honestly. Now, Barber's success has come down to pressure, clinch, and outworking her opponents, just slamming them with a barrage of offense. It's not always pretty, but it's effective. She's outlanded her first 2 opponents 123-66, so almost exactly 2-1. Which is crucial, and considering how much success Aldrich had in round 1 of that fight, those numbers could be even more slanted. But again, she's far from technical, and she's willing to take a shot to land one, which we've seen. We actually saw that with Aspen Ladd recently, where that eventually caught up to her. Now, for Robertson, her big stat that stands out is her takedowns. She's landed 8 takedowns over 5 fights, and she's smashed her opponents on the mat. And those takedown numbers would be higher, but she's been so efficient with getting her adversaries out of there once they're on the ground, she doesn't need 2, 3, 4, 5 takedowns per fight. Robertson in this matchup is going to want to come forward, change levels, and take Maycee down. Barber is also going to want to come forward, hit Robertson with as much volume as she can, and keep attacking at close range and simply overwhelm her. Now, it's worth noting that neither of Barber's opponents have attempted to take her down, and she's fought girls who are strikers. Aldrich and Cyphers are not 100%, but very much strikers, and no one's been able to stop Robertson from taking them down. She's taken down all of her opponents very successfully. Robertson's coming off a fight against Frota, where Frota is a very physical fighter, but absolutely got dominated by Gillian on the mat. I incorrectly predicted that one. I thought this was a fight that Robertson might have some trouble with, but Frota had nothing for her. Robertson's striking is improving. The big question, is it good enough to hang on the feet with Barber if she's forced to stand? I'm not sure it is, but I don't think Barber's nearly as good as we think it is. I think Robertson's trending in the right direction. Barber's got a big push starter UFC run. I think that's why that impacts a little bit her perception. She's young. She's got a lot to say. She's a very talented fighter, but I think Robertson has put together a very impressive resume so far. She's got some more experience under her belt as far as her overall UFC time. Robertson's had to work for it. She's been the underdog in half her fights. And again, I like Robertson's more technical ground game to be the difference here. I think of all the skills we see here, Robertson's grappling is by far the best skill. Whether she's on top or on bottom, I think she can be very effective. Obviously, you don't want to be on the bottom against Maycee Barber. But I think that Robertson could defend herself enough to turn it into a positive position. I think Barber's willingness to move forward is going to open her up to those counter takedowns for Robertson. Robertson get in the single leg, chain some attempts together, and eventually get this fight to the ground. And Barber's going to struggle once she's on her back, a position she's not really familiar with. And I think Robertson eventually gets to her back and locks up that rear naked choke. And my prediction is Gillian Robertson to defeat Maycee Barber, hand her first career defeat, and I think she does it by submission. The midway mark of this event features the returning Joe Lauzon, Massachusetts native, 27-16-0, as he takes on the debuting JSP. How dare he take a nickname that's even similar to that? JSP, Jonathan Pearce, with a current record of 7 wins and 3 losses. Now, in this matchup, Lauzon is returning. He's fighting at home, which is huge. He has lost 3 in a row and 4 of 5. His only win was a kind of a garbage decision over Marcin Held. A fight I had Lauzon in that matchup, but he didn't do enough. He has just 3 wins over his last 9 outings. For Pearce, he's 7-3. He has won 4 in a row. He started his pro career 1-3, so he certainly rebounded and turned things around. He fought twice in Bellator, going 2-0, and then he went on the Contender Series and scored a TKO victory. So he's got some quality wins in recent outings that make his record far better than it actually looks. Physically, 2 inches taller, though the same. Pearce is 2 inches taller. They'll share the same reach. He's 12 years younger than Joe. Now, for Joe, he's at home. That's huge. It's the first time he's fought in Massachusetts since his 2013 loss against Michael Johnson. He hasn't fought in 18 months overall. He hasn't won a fight in 3 years. His last legit win, realistically, was back in the middle of 2016 against Diego Sanchez. And I say that again because I don't think he won the held fight. Now, what we know about Lauzon is that he is lethal on the mat, 100%. 18 wins by submission, and he's very good early in fights. Very aggressive, very capable. You give him a chance to finish you, and he will. Now, it's also worth noting he's landed more than one takedown in just 2 of his last 9 fights. And in both those matchups, he lost both of them, which is worth noting as well. And it's partially this. His cardio is not good. It's very poor. He fades quickly, and he fades hard. It cost him in the Stevie Ray fight, a matchup where he nearly finished him with a submission and couldn't get him out of there, and then just lost the matchup, couldn't hold on. I had Lauzon in that matchup. It was very disappointing, unfortunately. His durability also a major question mark. He's been finished 9 times overall, including back-to-back losses by TKO, versus guys not known for their knockout power. Chris Greatsmacher and Clay Guida, actually. Again, no knock on Joe. He's tough as nails, but again, your body can only do so much. It's also worth noting for Lauzon, he's 35 years old, and the majority of the big names from his era in the mixed martial arts are either gone or on their way out, and time catches up to everyone. I feel like I'm shitting all over Joe. He's a very talented fighter, but it's hard to see this being a good spot for him unless he catches a fighter who's just not ready for the big show, and the UFC's trying to give him that big send-off or opportunity to win a fight at home. And it's possible. He could catch lightning in a bottle one more time, and I don't know if he plans to retire, but certainly winning a fight in front of the home crowd is huge for a fighter like him, and he deserves that opportunity. Now, for Pearce, he returned to MMA after over a year away, coming into his last fight. His last 3 opponents are combined 16-9. His contender opponent, though, 10-5, accounting for most of those losses and most of those victories as well. So not great competition, but I do like what I see out of him. He has 5 wins by knockout, 1 submission victory. 2 of his 3 early losses were by submission. 5 of his 6 wins have come by stoppage, are after the first round, 3 in the third round. So that tells us something right there, that he's the type of guy who's very durable and keeps pushing and keeps pressing. Now, when he fought in the Contender Series, he was taken down early in that fight. His opponent attempted to choke. He's able to survive it, and that's something we're having to watch here is his submission defense. On the feet, he works a jab. Not a lot of flow to his vertical offense, but he started finding more success in round 2. Simply put, he was putting more pressure on his opponent, cutting off the cage, pressure him. His opponent started to slow down, and he was moving forward with strikes. He was stuffing takedowns. Lots of short-range success in the clinch with short punches, uppercuts through the guard, very effective that way. Again, he nearly got caught in an armbar by a tired opponent, and that leads you to wonder, is he submission prone? Is he a guy the UFC is looking at saying, if Joe's going to catch anybody, it's this inexperienced guy, he's going to catch him by sub. In the end, though, he landed just short of 200 significant strikes, which is very impressive. Now, again, Lauzon could slap on a submission and call it a night, but that window is limited. And I can't imagine this long of a layoff is going to be good for Joe, even if he's fighting his home crowd. Pearce, I think he'll push him hard. He'll avoid that early submission scenario. And then when Joe gets tired, Pearce will just keep pushing, keep pressuring, my apologies, with effective, nothing flashy, but effective pace. And my prediction is Jonathan Pearce to defeat Joe Lauzon by TKO. Moving all the way up to the heavies, we have the return of the Prince of War, former NFL player, and the controversial Greg Hardy with a current record of 6 wins and 1 loss, taking on the debuting Ben Sosoli, also known affectionately, and I love this, the Combat Wombat. Not shockingly, fighting out of Australia. He currently has a record of 7 wins, and I believe it is 2 losses. 7 wins and 2 losses. Now, for Sosoli, he's in a second. This is the second opponent for Hardy. The first one was scratched shortly after being announced. Lots of time for Sosoli to prep here, not exactly like a short camp. Now, Hardy's coming off the biggest win of his career, stopping Juan Adams in a very impressive fight. I had Juan Adams to win that matchup. Hardy stuffed the takedown and pounded him out. So far, he's 2-1 in the UFC, developing nicely after that DQ loss to Alan Crowder in his debut. Versus Sosoli, he had an eye poke no contest in the Contender Series. He had won 4 in a row, including avenging his most recent loss in his most recent fight, I believe it was. Now, physically, you look at Hardy. 6'5". He is 5 inches taller than his opponent. He's a massive man. We saw Sosoli listed at 5'9", which, I would think it would be wrong. Either way, Hardy's going to be the taller man. I would think Sosoli's more 6 feet tall. 8-inch reach advantage for Greg. Both guys will come in at the limit. Hardy's just a physically bigger man all the way around, other than the weight. Now, for Sosoli, 6 of his 7 wins have come by knockout. He's 1-2 in the scorecards. His only decision win, shockingly, is a 5-round split decision victory. He has one third-round finish as well, so it says he has some power later in the matchup. As I said, he's from Australia, big trip for the United States. It's not his first. His last 3 opponents before the Contender Series were 26 and 16, and it's beyond fighting the Contender Series. He actually fought on the Ultimate Fighter 28 season. He was the first pick of Kelvin Gastelum. He lost in the first round to eventual tournament winner Juan Espino, which, again, wasn't a great season of the Ultimate Fighter. They almost immediately released the guy who lost in the finals, which was too bad for him. And hey, it is what it is. Heavyweights are hard to come by. That's why Greg Hardy's getting such a big push here. Now, in that fight, he lost a 2-round decision because he couldn't stay off his back. He was exhausted after the first round. Didn't show a whole heck of a lot. Now, he has power in his hands. He's not overly athletic. He's tough. He likes to stand and bang. He's very hittable, though. He needs his power to hold up and put guys down. That's how he got his last opponent out of there, is simply by hitting harder and staying vertical longer and eventually dropping him. Contender Series, again, in that fight, he was cutting off the cage, looking for the land of the big shot against a very big man in that matchup, not really setting up his offense too effectively and picking his spots, but again, looking to throw hammers that just were not set up overly well. Now, Hardy, he's a big man. He's quick. He's got big power. He's improving, which is the key. No, so far his biggest area of concern has been getting taken down, which he did much better against Juan Adams, and getting tired. If fights go longer, he's far less effective. Crowder tested and was able to take him longer. Maybe that's why he had such a brain fart through that illegal knee, because he was so tired and exhausted. Sosoli, he's tough, but he lacks the size to push Hardy around or the wrestling to really threaten him. Unless he catches lightning in a bottle and absolutely cracks the 6'5" monster and puts him down, I see him struggling to find much success here. His willingness to get hit by a bigger, larger man is not, bigger, heavier man is not going to be a positive thing here. Look for Hardy to continue to build his resume, close that distance, overwhelm Sosoli, who will do his best to hang in there. But my prediction is Greg Hardy to defeat Ben Sosoli by knockout. In the co-main event of the evening, we're in the UFC's featherweight division in a matchup we were very much geared up for last time, not that long ago when we were back in Mexico, as El Pantera Yair Rodriguez, ranked 7th in the division, 12-2-0 with 1 no contest, takes on the 8th ranked Little Heathen Jeremy Stephens with a current record of 28 wins, 16 losses, and 1 no contest. Now this fight, as I said, was rebooked from the Mexico event about 3 weeks ago. We had the eye poke from Rodriguez early in the fight, and Yair went off feeling Jeremy was faking. Bad blood's now developed. This is a huge element into this matchup. Jeremy couldn't get his eye open. Even the doctor couldn't force it open. So and considering how much Jeremy sacrificed to make that fight happen, to be in Mexico prepping for the altitude, I don't think he was looking for his an easy way out. Now, in that matchup, I selected Jeremy Stephens to win the fight. We'll see if that holds up here. Now, Rodriguez has won 9 of his last 10 fights. The lone loss in that stretch to Frankie Edgar, which was a ground and pound based loss. He had that late knockout win over the Korean Zombie. I had Rodriguez in that fight. Wins over BJ Penn, Alex Caceres, Andre Fili, and Dan Hooker as well. For Stephens, he's lost back-to-back matchups to Zabit and Jose Aldo. He had wins over Josh Emmett, Duho Choi, and Gilbert Melendez prior to that, and then losses to Moicano, Edgar Holloway. He's fought all the top names. He's essentially fought anybody who is anybody in this division. 5-7 in his current stretch, but again, top competition is what's been beating him. Physically, Rodriguez 2 inches taller, same reach though. Rodriguez, the younger man by 6 years, and he's been out for 10 plus months coming into this fight, a little bit longer since the original fight was booked. Now, Stephens, absolutely massive knockout power, 19 wins by knockout, versus Rodriguez, that flashy striking technique, high flying, high risk kicks that have high reward if they do land. Now, Stephens, he's coming off fighting a guy who's a dynamic striker in Zabit Magomed-Shapirov. And he looked good. He pressured. He had a lot of success. In that fight, though, we saw with big power, he needs to avoid head hunting, maintain good pressure, cut off the cage. He was pressuring through Zabit's techniques, and that was impressive. It ultimately led to Zabit taking him down. Stephens has implemented a very nice very solid low kick. Nice addition. It could make his opponents easier to hit with less mobility, slow them down a little bit, and it diversifies his offense. As I said, he forced Zabit to wrestle, an area that Stephens has either struggled with in a lot of fights, or he's augmented the odd time, but not that much recently, using it in his own offense. For Rodriguez, against Korean Zombie, he came out throwing a lot of hard low kicks. He was focused on being a smart fighter, being more economical with his offense and landing big offense, but not exposing himself and not gassing himself out. I anticipate he's going to focus this fight on a kick-heavy offense here, which I'll tell you why in a minute. Now, where the Korean Zombie had success, and where I would think Stephens would have success as well, is pressuring forward, throwing those flurries, hurting him, backing it up, making it an absolute dogfight. Rodriguez, he needs time to set up his offense. He's got his jab is good. He throws a lot of single strikes, and he's very dynamic, and he can get them off quickly. But again, he's better when he has that extra moment to really pick his spots. He was having success with counter strikes, throwing spinning elbows, turning your pressure against you. And that's something Stephens need to be wary of. Stephens either has to be all the way in and really in his face, throwing big power, or he has to sit back and try to find his moments to pressure forward. Now, Korean Zombie started to find success in round 3, pressing more, but needed to be more aggressive. That's when Rodriguez started to slow down. That is certainly a concern here because there is nothing after round 3. I had Stephens in Mexico winning a 5-round fight. Now we're in the United States in a 3-round fight, which you would anticipate is better for Jeremy Stephens. I think Stephens, he will handle the emotional scenario better, the bad blood factor better, and that could get Yair off his game. But I like Rodriguez not in Mexico, fighting on the road almost and feeling a little bit more urgency here. I also think the fact that they're not fighting at altitude nullifies a little bit of Stephens' training and doesn't make Rodriguez nearly as vulnerable. And the fact that they're only going 3 rounds means Rodriguez can throw some of those flashier techniques and doesn't have to worry about getting into rounds 4 and 5 and still being capable of pressuring. If Yair can stay at range, he can land those kicks, keep Jeremy on the outside to set up his offense. I think once Stephens starts eating some of those body kicks and those low kicks from Rodriguez, he's going to have trouble getting into range. And with Stephens has that beautiful low kick, I don't think his offense, he's going to want to trade shot for shot with Rodriguez over 3 rounds. Again, I kind of looked at this and said, all Stephens has to do is win one of the first 3 rounds, and I think he'll be in great shape in rounds 4 and 5, turning into that dogfight if he doesn't get the knockout prior to that. I don't think that's the case anymore. He might be able to get the knockout, but I think Rodriguez is in a much better position here. Stephens needs to make this fight ugly. I think he's going to struggle to find his range with consistency, and he's going to suffer for it as he presses forward. Look for Yair to utilize his speed and diversity with those kicks being a main factor here. They'll hold up very well over 3 rounds against Jeremy Stephens. I'm going to do a little bit of a flip. We'll see if it comes back to bite me in the ass. But my prediction is Yair Rodriguez to defeat Jeremy Stephens by decision. And now in the main event of the evening, we're in the UFC's light heavyweight division as the Devastator Dominick Reyes, currently ranked 4th with an undefeated 11-0 record, takes on the former middleweight champion, the All-American Chris Weidman, with a current record of 14 wins and 4 losses. Now, Reyes is undefeated, as I said, 5-0 in the UFC, with a perfect escalation of competition, fighting a couple lesser-known fighters than Jared Cannonier when he was at 205, and then OSP, then Volkan Ozdemir. It's a nice escalation. The Chris Weidman is kind of an interesting move. We don't know where Weidman really fits in the equation, but still, I like what we've seen so far out of him as far as his competition. For Weidman, former middleweight champion, he's moving up, obviously, to 205. He is 1-4 in his last 5 fights. He's coming off a brutal knockout loss to Jacare Souza, which I correctly predicted. And during this 1-4 stint, he's been knocked out in all 4 of his fights, and his only loss came against Kelvin Gastelum in a fight he won by submission, but nearly got knocked out in that matchup as well. Reyes, 6'4", he's 2 inches taller than Weidman, who's a big middleweight, to say the least, coming up. 1 inch reach advantage for the former middleweight champion, and Reyes is the younger man by 5 years. So now with Weidman moving up, he's already talking about adding John Jones to a list that already includes Anderson Silva. He needs to focus here. He is facing, he's facing a guy who's building towards the title shot and has a lot of momentum coming into this fight. We saw Luke Rockhold, the guy who beat Weidman, who looked more like the type who could benefit from filling out and not cutting as much. We saw him move up, and he got absolutely obliterated by Jan Blachowicz. Rockhold's chin at 185 was an issue, and against bigger men at 205, it did not work out, and Blachowicz, not known for finishing guys, he absolutely knocked Rockhold fucking stupid. Now, Weidman's lost 4 times by knockout in his last 5 fights. He's now facing a bigger man who has accrued 6 of his 11 victories by knockout. So take that for what it's worth. Weidman was a thicker dude at 185 pounds. Moving up might allow him to make weight much easier, but I don't think it's going to actually be a positive for his overall performance. At 185 pounds, I felt he was a little bit sluggish and clunky with his striking, not very smooth. And I don't think that's going to change when you put on an additional 20 pounds. If he wants to change his game approach up and be just that fucking blanket grinder, and that's what he could look at, and use his wrestling, use his grappling, it could be beneficial. I don't know if we're going to see there. His output's never been spectacular. He's actually coming off his best UFC output of all time, 68 significant strikes, but he gets tired. He slows down. He tends to be a decent starter, but again, he has a drop-off in performance. He's very flat-footed, becomes very hittable, and guys tend to get him out of there in later stages of round 1, round 2, and round 3. His wrestling, as I previously mentioned, very good. 7 takedowns in his win over Gastelum, who a lot of people would say is a blown-up welterweight. He had 4 against Mousasi way back in the day. Can he take down a very big and above-average guy with mobility in Reyes? That's a huge question. Now, if he gets Reyes down, he has good submission skills, but the clock starts ticking on the scenario, and it starts ticking very early. How long before he's unable to get him down because he's simply too tired? Now, for Dominick Reyes, this is his first main event, and he's coming off a very close fight. I had Reyes in that matchup. I thought Ozdemir won the fight, though. He didn't dominate. Maybe that's why we felt Reyes didn't have as good a performance. The big thing is, too, title talk. He is I don't know how much he said in the media about John Jones. I'm sure he's mentioned him a couple of times, but certainly people are talking about a win here could get him a shot at the title. Maybe he's 1 win away, but there's pressure growing in this guy. It's hard to hide from, especially when you're fighting in a main event. He's coming off back-to-back wins that went outside of the first round. The first time since very early in his pro career. It's good experience. He slowed down but still effective. He pretty much finished OSP in that last fight. And again, so in his second last fight, just ran out of time. And against Ozdemir, he probably had better performances in rounds 2 and 3, which got him the victory. Now, Reyes hits very hard. Probably the hardest guy Weidman's ever faced as far as how hard he hits. Maybe Romero hits harder. I don't know. And he's pretty quick with a long frame, which is really a whole bunch of holy fuck for Weidman to stare at here. I like the way Reyes can be a patient striker. He doesn't get too aggressive. He looks for openings before going for that kill shot. He has been taken down 3 times in 5 fights overall. Ozdemir got him once. OSP got him once. He reacts fairly well. He didn't have any major issues. He showed he can counter takedown attempts. He's got a capable submission game if he's put in that position. I don't think he's going to go out and submit Chris Weidman unless he hurts him. He's got good ground and pound, which he could go to if Weidman gets desperate and puts himself in a bad spot looking for a takedown. But I think the key is using the defensive wrestling to keep Weidman out of that position and make him work very hard if he does look to take him down. Now, when I look at this, we've seen that Weidman can Reyes can counter wrestle. He has a capable submission game. He's got good ground and pound. As I said, he needs to keep Weidman out of the spot. I think I repeated myself there. My apologies. Now, how does Weidman win this matchup? He just needs to use his wrestling. He needs takedowns and top position, leading to a submission rounds 1 or 2. After that, he's going to start to slow down and engaging that bigger man. It's going to be very difficult. And losing the size advantage he had at middleweight is going to be not ideal in rounds 3, 4, and 5. I just don't see it putting on that extra weight is going to be good for his cardio. For Reyes, he needs to use his length, threaten with the power, keep Weidman on the outside, defend any takedown attempts, make Weidman work hard, make Weidman move. When he opens up, look to tag him with as much offense as he can, but at the same time, don't expose himself to getting taken down. I think he can do it early and unload on him. I think he can do it late as Weidman slows down. I think Weidman's going to be slower overall. He could that extra weight's going to be too much. He's going to struggle with the size and power of Reyes, things he normally didn't do well with at middleweight. They'll be bigger, more significant here at the heavyweight division. And my prediction is, light heavyweight division. My prediction is Dominick Reyes to defeat Chris Weidman by TKO. So those are my 6 main card predictions for UFC on ESPN 6. All of my preliminary picks available at kamikazeoverdrive.net. Remember, this is a Friday night event, so do not miss out. Don't show up on Saturday night looking for the fights when they're already in the books. So I'm going to do my best to get everything else posted as quickly as possible. My bet pack's $15. We have won money on 4 of the last 5 shows and had some good returns. We should have won huge in the last event, but unfortunately we were pretty much 11 wins and 3 losses, but those 3 losses were troublesome ones. Either way, we're going to keep swinging. We're going to keep pounding away at this. Thank you for tuning in. You can subscribe and like my video as well. KO_predictions on Twitter. All that fun business. And again, we keep rolling. We got lots of fights ahead of us. The Friday night event does get us a little bit of a break for the next Saturday event, so I'm looking forward to that significantly. And that is the next one is the Askren versus Maya fight, which should be a lot of fun. Thanks for tuning in, guys. Talk to you soon. Hi.